Hi everyone, Mike Napoleon here with Super Speed Golf. I'm here at Utah Valley University with my good friend Dr. Tyler Standifird, and we're going to try to answer one of the questions we get all the time at Super Speed, and that's, does the golf shoe I wear matter when I'm speed training or I'm trying to get more distance out on the course?
Yeah, and this is something, Mike, we've talked a lot about the importance of ground reaction force. This is your connection with the ground, and the type of shoe you put on your foot is going to help or hinder your ability to produce those forces.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I mean, in other sports, do you feel like the shoes matter for like track athletes or things like that?
Yeah, I mean, you think of the importance for any real athlete, right? Track and field, basketball, football, things as simple as changing out length of the cleats or when we should use them versus not. I mean, they pay such fine detail to this in every other sport. We should be doing the same in golf.
So we're going to test a number of different shoes today, including some of the new things here from our friends at SQAIRZ, which are shoes that are really designed to help people use the ground better. We're going to test this on the Smart to Move force plates, do some of our new ground force protocols here at Super Speed, and see what the data tells us. All right, Tyler, well, let's talk a little bit more in detail of, exactly some of the technology in these new SQAIRZ shoes. And again, this is the Velo model, but these are similar things that are in all of the models that they make. Holding this, the first thing that I notice is that the toe box or the front part of the shoe is a lot wider than the others that I'm looking at.
Yeah, and we know how important that forefoot is to generating force, especially off the lead leg. And so allowing that foot and those toes to kind of spread out a little bit, kind of be in a little bit more of a normal position, might really help that player create a little bit more balance and stability to generate those vertical forces.
So maybe because of that, we might see a little more vertical force coming off the lead leg. I mean, it's obviously something we work on with our players all the time. Sure. And we certainly see when players have shoes that kind of compress their toes that there's issues there. Yeah. The next thing that I see is really the spikes. So like the spike pattern on these shoes, obviously they're real spikes, which is going to give us more friction on the ground. But, anything we see here about like the actual position of the spikes on these? Yeah, again, the position's going to those locations where we know that pressure should be going, right? There's that point of application of a force, or where on the foot should we be applying force for maximum results. And they've researched that and kind of put those in those positions. And that's something I'm really excited to look at in our own data and see if those things line up too. Yeah, I can't wait. I really do think that's a cool thing. The last thing that I would notice just obviously here is that this shoe overall is a lot more stable. Like you can bend it a little bit, but compared to a lot of shoes out there, this is a much more stable platform. Do you think having like a stable base beneath the player is going to change anything here about how they're going to use the ground?
Yeah, again, we speak and study about ground reaction force so much, and that stable base, the stable connection, feeling balanced is such an important piece of the puzzle. And again, it'll be awesome to jump into the data and see if the shoe allows for those types of things to happen.
All right, Tyler. So for the first segment we're going to talk about, we're going to use me as a guinea pig. Now, again, I'm not the most powerful player on the planet, but, I can move it out there, 275, 280. And let's say I have at least a good knowledge of what I'm supposed to be doing and how to use the ground. Again, not saying I'm a tour player, but pretty normal golfer, and I think I can do okay with how I'm pushing on the ground during my swing. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to test 3 different kinds of shoes, all right? I've got just kind of like a normal golf shoe. This is kind of what I'd wear if I was going to go walk 9 holes at the club. This shoe has some, I don't want to say spikes, but it's a spikeless shoe that has some grip on the bottom, kind of lightweight foam type of shoe. Also going to test kind of a zero drop, much more kind of turf shoe kind of bottom, right? And also with much less support. So there's not going to be a lot of support going on in that shoe. And then we're going to test in the new SQAIRZ Velo. Yep. And that shoe's obviously going to have a lot more substance to it overall.
More stability, removable cleats, right, in different positions, a little bit more to the shoe, you could say.
All right, Tyler, I just got done hitting some balls, in those zero drop shoes. And I wear those a lot just around. I actually feel like they kind of make my feet stronger when I'm wearing them, but certainly, harder to do a lot of activity in. Then I hit some in just kind of my FootJoy Flex, kind of softer, more pliable shoes. Again, I've played golf in those a lot, wear those walking, and then hit some balls in the SQAIRZ. Now, I'll say overall, there was a definite difference in feel between those different shoes. I'm really curious, like, what did the data show on those swings?
Yeah, again, I would guess, Mike, if I was to estimate your power source in your swing throughout the history of your life, I would say that you've been a rotational player. You're a person who likes to use that rotation as a way to build speed and power?
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like torque has always been a big thing for me in producing speed. And I think probably comes from years of golf coaching and working on sequencing, and just all of that has been geared toward, I would say that's always been kind of my primary power source.
Yeah, and again, as I'm looking at these numbers, and if we kind of start with your primary power source, which is this rotational torques, right?
Okay.
The horizontal rotation that occurs. In that barefoot style shoe, we saw that value peak at about 95. Now, 95 units of torque per kilogram is actually pretty darn good. That's a number that we'd be pretty happy with. But if we then look at that comparison to that FootJoy shoe, you went from 95 up to 100.
That's better.
So almost a 5% jump there, so a little bit better. Then we throw you in that SQAIRZ shoe, and you go all the way up to 114.
Wow,
so
that's
now
a big
we're
jump.
talking, 14% improvement over that FootJoy shoe, even a bigger improvement, maybe closer to 20% in that barefoot style shoe.
Yeah, and I mean, I could feel that when I was wearing the SQAIRZ shoe for sure. Like, especially, and interestingly, I actually felt it the most on my trail foot.
Okay.
Like, my trail foot being able to kind of create some of that torque, as I'm starting my downswing, letting the front foot push forward, and that back foot just felt very kind of planted into the ground. So it was a very stable base to be able to create a lot of rotational power off of.
Yeah, again, when you create more of that frictional connection with the ground, you have that capacity to do more without that fear of slipping. And this isn't the only data I've kind of looked at, right? Like, and that's a data set that I tend to see improve in other players as well. Now, we jump into the lateral force, right? This is the towards the ball, or towards the target, away from the target force. Okay. This is a force that is the smallest of the forces we measure in the golf swing, so you always have to think about putting these numbers in the context of what they should be and those percentage improvements. So, and honestly, Mike, you're actually a fabulous lateral player as well. I would say that's a place where you tend to do a really good job of creating lateral forces.
That's never been a problem for me in my swing either. That's for sure.
And we look at those numbers again: barefoot style shoe, about 17% of your body weight. The FootJoy was 19%, and then up to just a little over 20% in the SQAIRZ shoe. So again, smaller raw numbers, but from a percentage value, being able to tick up 1 to 2% in that raw value ends up being a percentage change that approaches 4 or 5%. So definitely a little more lateral force there as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of easy to feel like. And I'd also say, we're testing on artificial turf here in your lab. I think it's kind of an interesting point, though, that we saw that big of a change, because I would actually think on artificial turf that some of these other shoes with just the rubber soles would perform better than they would even on grass, where it's probably going to have a little more give, especially if it was to get wet. Like, I definitely feel like, that SQAIRZ shoe would provide a lot more traction, especially when we're outside on turf.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a really good point. Now, the last force we look at is this vertical force, and you've always said that's something you try and work on in your game. It's a weakness that you have that you're trying to improve.
I'm always trying to get more vertical force, and I'm always trying to get it sooner. Like, if anything, when I go bad, I'm going to start, my vertical force is going to peak late, and it's not going to be as much as I want to see.
Yep, and so if we look at those numbers, again, barefoot style shoe, your vertical force peaked at about 145% of body weight, and this is your combined leg peak. The FootJoy was 155 and the SQAIRZ was 159. And so definitely some upticks as we get in these more stable shoes, you could say. Now, you mentioned timing. Timing is something that I really like to look at. And when I think of timing, I always go to impulse, which is this idea of if I can turn that force on a little bit sooner, I can apply it for a little longer time, and now maybe my raw numbers don't go up, but my impulse value could see some changes.
Yeah, so I'm getting more use out of vertical force, even if the max peak isn't necessarily growing by a huge percent.
Exactly. You peak that force a little bit earlier, and the impulse number will go up. So
all right, well, let's see
if I look at some of these impulse numbers, barefoot style shoe was about a 44 impulse unit, which is in Newton seconds, or kind of Newton seconds per body weight. The FootJoy shoe was 45 and the Square shoe was 51.
Oh, wow, that's a big jump.
Yeah, we see a jump there of about 13, 14%
Yeah, that's a big
as you
one.
go up to there. And again, you look at the data, it's a little bit coming from the fact that you're just peaking that same vertical force earlier in the downswing. Longer time to generate that force, a greater capacity to deliver it to the club head.
All right, Tyler. Well, I mean, I guess brass tacks, it sounds like, you know, I probably need to be playing in these SQAIRZ shoes, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, for you, Mike, as a golfer, I think there'd be no reason why I wouldn't put you in that shoe if it was comfortable for you and you liked how it felt, because we see the numbers that we want to see improve as you take swings in that shoe.
Yeah, and I believe we had a pretty reasonable ball speed gain there too. I think club speed was up 4 miles an hour or so on these later things at this, and I think ball speed was up there about 4 or 5 miles an hour too. So, I mean, can't argue with the numbers. I mean, I'm definitely going to be giving SQAIRZ a try this season. All right, Tyler, now it's time to get back into your world and bring in some random subjects and do some testing on them. Now, here's a little different piece, though, of what we really want to test with these. And I think, you know, if somebody doesn't know how to use the ground, just giving them a different shoe isn't going to magically make them use the ground, you know, 10 times better. But, you know, we've built a lot of detailed ground reaction force protocols here at SuperSpeed, and we know what kind of results those protocols typically have. What I'm looking for here is, you know, can we help somebody gain more capacity to learn how to use the ground faster with our protocols by changing the shoe? What do you think about that?
And again, Mike, you know I'm a guy who loves data, right? So it's like here in my lab, I bring people in and we just let the numbers do the talking. And I've tested a lot of golfers, and we know that they struggle with some key things in their abilities to produce ground reaction force. And sometimes we can make big changes just through some of the drill progressions in our ground reaction force protocols with SuperSpeed. But I think it's going to be awesome to start to look at putting them in a different shoe that is designed to help them be more stable, create some better movements. Is that going to make those changes and improvements even bigger?
I mean, again, any way that I feel like we can enhance players getting better with our SuperSpeed protocols is a big win. And if it's as simple as just having them wear a different shoe when they're training and then testing and getting data, I think that's a home run. So, you know, I can't wait to see what happens. Okay, Marcus, now we're going to go through our level 2 ground reaction force protocol that we've built here at SuperSpeed. This protocol is all about using the ground more efficiently, especially looking at like timing and point of application of ground force. Now, for this protocol, you're going to need your driver because we're going to be hitting some balls. We're also going to be doing some drills with our red or heavy SuperSpeed club, and we're going to have a PRG, our launch monitor, down so that we can kind of see how those speeds of the practice swings are going as we go through the protocol. Now, in this protocol, we're going to do a number of different drills. The first drill is going to be called SQAIRZ, and we're going to do this in a specific way where we're going to start with our feet together, we're going to jump back toward our trail side, land, and then explode back toward the lead side. Drill really works a lot on lateral force production in the trail leg. After that drill, we're going to do our step back drill, which again is a drill kind of working on trail leg lateral force and how we load the swing, you know, with some of those ground reaction forces. Then we're going to do our trail foot force pedal smash. So we're going to kind of get a little more, you know, closer to the golf swing and learn how to really push in the specific point of application on that trail side. All right, after that, we're going to do one of our favorite drills here at SuperSpeed called our step change of direction drill. This starts to work a lot more on the transition to our lead side and also some of the sequencing elements in our lower body. Then we're going to do our lead ball force pedal smash, so really looking at specific vertical force and AP force on the lead leg. Then we're going to do our double smash drill. So we're going to kind of put it together and put both force pedals in and try to get all of that together. We're going to finish that protocol up with some normal stance swings, just really direct application and see how we did. That sound like fun?
Sounds great. Yep.
All right, let's get going.
All right, so now that we've finished those ground reaction force protocols and the SQAIRZ shoes, Marcus, I want you to just talk to us about how you felt about that experience, the shoes compared to your other ones, and how some of those drills maybe altered the way you felt in your golf swing.
Okay. Yeah, my first shoes I started out with, I didn't feel a whole lot of support in them. When I put the SQAIRZ shoes on, I really felt a lot more support on my the sides of my feet, and I really like the space that my toes have in there, the toe box area. And after going through the drills and then applying it in a golf swing, I really felt like I was able to generate more force from the ground and focus more on where I was pushing off the ground and at what points in my swing. And ultimately, I really felt like I was able to explode through my swing a lot more after going through those drills.
Awesome. That sounds great, Marcus.
Okay, Tyler, so let's talk about Marcus, our first subject that came in. Slightly higher handicapper, maybe not quite as consistent of a ball striker. I mean, do shoes matter for him?
Yeah, first off, let's just start with kind of his pre-assessments where we had him in his kind of standard shoe that he would play golf in from time to time versus the SQAIRZ shoe. And we walk through these force productions that he has. So from a lateral force standpoint, the shoes were actually identical. 24% of his body weight on that lateral direction, side to side.
Which is pretty good.
Which is pretty good, yeah. He was actually a pretty good lateral player. Rotationally, this guy was actually quite a powerful rotational player. He was able to produce 178 units per kg in his regular shoe, and that actually fell off a little bit in the SQAIRZ in the pre-assessment down to just under 170.
Okay.
Now, if we
but
go
still really high.
Again, high numbers in terms of this rotational player. Now, vertical force standpoint, this is kind of where it gets a little bit interesting, where that vertical force was almost identical, about 188, 189 percentage of body weight, so good vertical force player. He was really quite late on his kind of standard shoe. And so dive into that impulse value where we can see, did he turn that force on a little bit earlier? He was able to turn that force on a little bit earlier, and the impulse went from 57 in that standard shoe to 62 in the SQAIRZ. So almost a, what, 10-ish, 9-10% jump.
So that's a pretty big jump just putting the shoes on.
Just putting the shoe.
Yeah, and then, the next thing we did, I put him through our level 2 ground force protocol from Super Speed Golf, and he'd never really worked on, using the ground. Now, he uses the ground pretty well for somebody that's never really practiced it that much. So I'm kind of interested to see, after we did those drills and went back, we then tested him in his own shoes and in the SQAIRZ. So what do we see then?
Yeah, and we can see that the regular shoe, the lateral dropped down just a little bit from his post, so it went from 24 to just under 20. His rotational torque, or that vertical torque, went up, actually. It went from 178 all the way up to 190, so quite a bit more rotational power there. And then again, I like this idea of the vertical force. Similar numbers, 189, 189, but through that drill progression, we were able to get him to turn on that vertical force a little bit earlier. So his impulse jumped from 57 all the way up to 68, and this was in his standard shoe.
All right, so what if we were wearing the SQAIRZ after we did the drills? Because again, we talked a lot about, maybe, if we have somebody going through drills in a more stable shoe like the SQAIRZ, maybe there's a potential for them to gain even more.
Yeah, for sure. And this was a player that I think he really stood to gain a lot from his capacity of timing of the vertical force. He had some good numbers, but they were so late that it wasn't really an effective means to get out to his club speed.
Wasn't affecting swing speed.
Not at all.
Yeah,
not at all. And so you look at his SQAIRZ data post-training. Lateral dropped just a little bit, again 24 to just under 20, about 17. And then his rotational torque actually went up a little bit, so from 168 to 175. The big change for him was this vertical force. So not only did he go higher, he went from 188 to 215.
Oh, wow.
So that's an increase of 27%.
That's huge.
But that impulse value just skyrocketed. So he went from 62 all the way up to 82.
Oh, wow.
And now that 82 compared to his post regular shoe, the testing shoe, right, was 68. So putting on the SQAIRZ actually allowed him to generate a lot more force vertically earlier in the swing, and we get this real high uptick in that impulse value.
And that's definitely an area that we were kind of hypothesizing could be there, because for somebody that is late with vertical, which is a lot of people, having a little bit more stability under that lead foot to be able to push, definitely can make a huge difference. And honestly, he's probably beforehand might have been overusing lateral force, and those other ones ended up really late because of it.
Sure.
So even though that value went down, balancing that out with the timing probably had a pretty big effect on his swing speed.
Well, and that's the thing that's manifest in, right? And we know we've done these ground reaction force protocols that are in our app. We know that we're going to increase forces and help swing speed. It was awesome to see how, based on the shoe, we might see even more of an effect. His club speed, I think at the baseline was right around 99 to 100 at peaks.
Yep.
Fastest one we saw him post was in the square, went all the way up to just a little bit over 107 miles per hour.
Yeah, which is a huge jump, you know,
Yeah.
for really not doing speed training, just working on those mechanics of the ground. So, I mean, definitely based on that data, you know, I think Marcus is going to have a much easier time learning how to use the ground well, you know, wearing those square shoes than his other normal golf shoes. So, you know, I think that's some pretty cool results. Why don't we take a look and see what our other subject did?
Just finished off some of the ground reaction force protocols, testing with the regular shoe and the SQAIRZ shoe with Truman, who, again, remember, is a guy who tends to bomb the ball anyway, but would love to kind of hear your thoughts on the feelings of the shoe differences, maybe some of the drills, what that actually felt like when you were hitting a ball.
Yeah, I mean, I've never done something like that before. That it felt like I was more stable, especially in the shoes, and then in doing those workouts, you know, jumping back and forth, like I felt like I was activating those muscles that would help me, you know, really rip it.
Okay. What about when you, again, put the driver back in your hand, you're now hitting a ball, those feels transfer over, you know, what did that feel like swinging?
Yeah, I mean, I felt a little bit more locked in, if that makes sense, and just able to really go after it more uniform throughout the body than just swinging with the arms.
Awesome. Again, a guy who's already swinging really fast, swinging with the arms, feeling that kind of stability, going after it a little bit more. Awesome to hear kind of Truman's subjective feels and be able to look a little bit at the data as well.
Okay, so Truman, our second subject that came in. I mean, holy cow, this kid could move it.
Yeah, fast player, right? I mean, he's got club speeds, ball speeds. It was great, right? He's asking us questions like, well, what does this even stack up to?
Is that good?
Yeah, you're like, I don't know, top 5 PGA Tour ball speed? Like, that's pretty good.
It's like decent. I mean, pretty much about as good as Roy McIlroy.
Yeah.
Not terrible.
Fast player, but I think it's cool to have the context. I think we're going to have a lot of golfers who are like our first subject that are in the mid-high 90s and want to crest over that 100. But having a player like Truman come in who is using what he does really well and in a way to translate it to club speed. And so start looking at his comparison of kind of his standard. He kind of wore that like Air Jordan style sneaker we see a lot out on the golf course, right? That was kind of a shoe he played a lot in. So that's his kind of baseline shoe versus the SQAIRZ shoe. It was interesting how similar the data was except for one piece. So lateral forces were almost the same, 10% of body weight. This wasn't a big lateral player, pretty low. Rotationally, he did a good job rotationally. Both of them were 129 units of torque per kg, so almost identical. The vertical force is where it started to separate. And this is kind of an interesting story where his his Jordan-style shoe was about 180% peaking in vertical, but the impulse coming from the lead leg, and that's a really important part of that vertical force puzzle, was only 55.
Okay.
You go into the SQAIRZ, and that vertical force dropped a little bit in terms of magnitude, but really improved timing. He did a much better job turning that force on early, hanging on to it a little bit. And so his overall force dropped from 180 to 167, but his impulse actually went from 55 up to 62.
Okay.
So this was kind of something we saw quite a bit, I think, in this shoe with all of our subjects, was that vertical impulse, the ability to generate that force a little bit earlier in the swing, tended to increase for all of these.
And we saw that with mine as well.
We saw it with yours as well,
so I think we
right?
saw that with everybody we've tested today.
Now, again, Truman went through the drill progression, so we'd expect both of these numbers to improve regardless of the shoe he was in. And so you look at his post-regular, that lateral went from 10 to 16, so he's able to use the lateral a lot better. His rotational torques went from 129 to 135, so that's a lot better. And his vertical force went from 180 to 183, but the cool thing there is we were able to move that much earlier up in the process.
So we got it earlier in the process.
So the impulse went from 55 all the way up to 67.
Okay, great.
So nice impulse there. Now you put him in the SQAIRZ, and his lateral actually goes from 10 to 12, so still a nice increase. His rotational torque goes from 129 to 134, so again, a nice increase there. And then the real jump here was with his vertical force. So he went from 167 all the way up to almost 190 in vertical force. And then that lead leg vertical impulse went from 62 all the way up to 74. And 74 was that biggest number that we saw for him, any shoe, any condition. And it was pretty wild to watch those club speeds tick up. Again, he's pretty near his ceiling from his physical capacities. So to squeeze out another, what, 3 miles an hour?
Yeah, I think we ended up. I think we peaked out, in the pre-testing right in that 125 range.
Yep.
And I think in the after it was almost up to 128, which is just crazy.
Yeah. So great results. And again, I think it's cool to see some of the commonalities between these subjects in terms of maybe being able to create that vertical force a little bit earlier, creating much better impulses, which is a great connection to clubhead speed.
Yeah, well, I mean, we work on that with just about every player, professional, amateur alike. It seems like we're always trying to get vertical force earlier. It definitely seems like there's something there that, that platform in the SQAIRZ is definitely helping people do that. So that's a big deal that we saw consistently throughout all the subjects. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of great data here. I mean, I think Truman also really liked the way those shoes felt.
Yeah, he did.
So I think he's going to be wearing those out on the course this year. All right, Tyler, it's time for the final decision here. Do we think that shoes matter when it comes to creating more speed and getting more out of using the ground?
Yeah, I'm a guy who always wants more data, but I think what we did today showed that for those participants we had in the lab, these for sure made a difference for them. They helped them utilize the ground a little bit better, increased some capacities, and we saw some really nice improvements in those ground reaction forces.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest piece here. Like, we know people are going to get better at using the ground by going through our super speed ground reaction force protocols, but being able to even enhance that further by just getting something like a new shoe, I think it's a big deal. I mean, I certainly felt it myself when I was using these shoes. And I think it's just exciting to see a company like SQAIRZ that's really creating, performance enhancing, materials for shoes. Like, so much of it's just been from a style standpoint. Like, this is something that's actually going to make you swing better.
Yeah, for sure. And it's exciting to think about the new advancements in technology that we've seen employed in other sports. I think to see it to come to the world of golf is going to be cool for any level of players, see if this is something that can help them use the ground better and swing more powerfully.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely going to be playing in these this year. I think you're going to start seeing a lot more pairs of SQAIRZ out on the course.